I would make the first principle to be maintained and preserved and cherished, to be principled, to be in this conviction of what is Krishna consciousness in such a way that we are not compromising ourselves for so-called practical purposes, and simultaneously, or as one of the principles, we have to be flexible. Flexibility is a principle of yoga, especially yoga asana, stretching and bending and so on. This is all developing flexibility, and I think an interesting question would be how flexibility might be developed by leaders and managements. What kind of practices could be instituted for practicing being flexible? I think this could be interesting exercises for training for education. A second point is being people-centered, as we say, as opposed to objects and institutions-centered. Just last night, I was fortunate to see this new film of Yadubara Prabhu and Mother Vishaka about Srila Prabhupada, and this comes out so strongly how people-centered Srila Prabhupada was. I think we always need to remember that. Among sociologists, starting with Max Muller from the early 20th century, he spoke of an idea, a concept of how religions happen and develop. There is a charismatic figure, and when that charismatic figure, after he inspires so many people, he or she leaves, departs the world, then those who follow necessarily need to institutionalize. And this institutionalization he called the routinization of charisma. It's a very commonly known expression, at least among scholars of religion. And so I think it's also good to be aware that we will always be in a kind of tension between the need for charisma and the need for routine. It's built into our tradition. We have our daily temple routines. We have many sorts of routines. But also, it's all about charisma, originating, of course, in Krishna. And somehow we need to always be pursuing that balance, I would say. Next, I would say compassion, to be genuinely compassionate. And I think also there is scope for discussion how to talk about the cultivation of compassion. And we might actually draw help for this from other religious traditions. There is a book that came out recently, a popular book 12 steps toward compassion, something like this, from a famous lady scholar whose name is slipping my mind at the moment, but she's very, very recognized. Perhaps to study such literature, in addition of course, being grounded in our own tradition of compassion, which is so much emphasized, but to really think more deeply, are there ways this can be cultivated consciously and indeed systematically? So such a book as I suggested might be useful to think about. And you know, perhaps, so to say, translating or using our own terminology, but getting ideas from her book. And then also what I see in Srila Prabhupada's way of doing things is his constantly empowering devotees. It's mentioned in this Hare Krishna film, the main way that Srila Prabhupada managed his expanding movement was through letters, by writing letters. And I think if one studied what sort of themes and flavors come out of, I think a major one would be empowerment. You can do it. Encouraging, go out and establish a temple, go out and preach, distribute books, etc. Empowerment is very important, and I mention this is maybe jumping to other questions. I mention this because I have noticed over the years that despite our best intentions and despite all the good things that we do, it seems that something in our culture tends within temple communities to disempower. This is probably not the case at this temple, but in certain places I have seen. It can be a very gradual and subtle process. And in particular, I've seen this the case where there are brahmacharinis, unmarried women who live for a longer period of time in the temple. They become gradually more and more disempowered. And I think a lot of thought needs to go into critically looking what is our culture. That I think Prabhupada did exemplified all of these, what I've just mentioned. To be more specific, I think I would need time to reflect and, remember particular details of particular occasions like that.
Be given more focus on space.
One thing that Srila Prabhupada wrote about from very early on, I'm thinking of a particular article in one of his earliest Back to Godhead magazines of the 1940s. He expressed the notion of temples being places of education, of training and education. To a significant degree, this is becoming more and more realized. Of course, Srila Prabhupada established morning and evening classes, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and so on. And that goes on generally, at least morning classes. And then over the years, we have developed the Shastra courses, and those are being taught very nicely in certain places, and also it's becoming more and more available online. I would just say I think this trajectory needs to be kept at the same, direction, angle. And one experience I had when I went back to university, I did a master's degree at an institution in America called Graduate Theological Union. This is essentially a Christian institution, private institution in Berkeley, California, a consortium of 9 different theological schools from 9 very different Christian traditions. Many of the students in this Graduate Theological Union were studying to obtain what was called a degree called Master of Divinity. Having already completed an undergraduate degree, they would then come and do this 2-year, actually I think 3-year course, which would then qualify them in their respective churches to take a position as a minister or priest. Prior to having this degree, they were not accepted as proper ministers. And they had a very rigorous course of education, of study, including, just as one example, of course, so much theology, quite a wide variety of courses. One of the courses they had to take is called, in English, homiletics. This is the practice, the study of how to preach. And they had professors of homiletics. And I heard a Christian preaching by one of these professors of homiletics, a lady, and she was so good, so powerful. And I thought, if we could have such training in our society, this would be so wonderful. So the educational trajectory, I think we need to keep it up and let it expand. And related to this, I think, and connected with the point before about empowerment versus disempowerment, if we think of modern educational institutions, people enter the institution, they study for some time, they get some qualification and some degree, and then they go out in the world. The mentality in our society tends to be, and this is always overgeneralizing, but in many centers it's to bring people in, welcome them in, and then do whatever we can to keep them in. And this is, I think, one of the factors which starts to corrode the potential empowerment. So, yeah, I think that's something to think about. A third point of trajectory I think we really should focus a lot more on is land-based communities. This is a huge challenge, but just from the perspective of preaching, I see it as so much important, essential for showing what it is we are saying. The philosophy is all wonderful, but where are you doing this? How is it, being done? So that, again, it's going on, but in a sense, compared to what's needed, I think we have only done very little yet. Understandably, because of the challenges and because we have many priorities, but we need to do more thinking and acting in this direction. which means including agriculture, and I would put a special emphasis on cow protection, because Srila Prabhupada was emphasizing it so much. Again, very difficult, and yet so necessary. In the last few weeks, for my own work, my own research on this subject of Go Seva and Go Raksha, I've been interviewing some people who are involved in what I would call Go Seva activism. And they all make this point that all problems are solved by serving cows. And I think this is such a nice mantra that we can take more seriously for our whole society as well. It means, for example, we have this person who has come and we need somebody to wash the pots. So at all cost, we will keep this person to wash pots. When actually this person has so much potential, and it may be that we need to think about terms of residence, meaning someone comes for a specified period of time, gets a training, an education. It may be 1 month, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and then at the end of that period, we congratulate them, we give them some kind of diploma, we have a celebration for them, and we wish them well on their way in life. And, of course, we do all that can be done to maintain the connection with that person. That person becomes a congregation member, and if everything has gone as it should go, just like in the university, the alumni there's an alumni association, and they're encouraged to feel always for the rest of their life connected to their institution, and also to serve the institution by donation and so on. That will only happen if they have had a very positive experience in their institution of higher learning, and they'll feel, yes, I want to help to support, rather than keeping someone as long as we possibly can until, as we say, they become fried out, and then they just leave, and then they don't want to have anything to do with us again. That's the idea. My main practice with regard to management, you can say, has been to avoid becoming a manager. Really, I've never, at any time, I can say, in these 40-some years, had any official management position. I have not even been a Sankirtan leader, even preaching in East Europe in groups of 2. I was always the second, the assistant. And I was happy in that position. I was, you might say, something of a head pujari for some time, but even then, not really officially. I was the ISKCON GBC minister of deity worship for some years, but I was by no means an exemplary minister. My excuse is that I was very engaged in education at the time. I was studying university education. But I passed on that position as soon as I could to someone much more qualified and focused. Having said that, I have observed so many of our leaders, managers in our society. I don't know if it's appropriate to mention names. It's all right, okay? One that immediately comes to my mind is Hridaya Chaitanya Prabhu at Radhadesh. From 1980, when he first was there, up until just 1 or 2 years ago, he was the temple president. I think not 1980, soon, sometime after that, he was the temple president, and he is still highly regarded today for how he developed that project. Just by his personal qualities of patience, persistence, thoughtful, caring for the residents, and I would say also for his religious participation every morning in morning programs, complete morning programs. So, yeah, he's one that especially stands out in my mind as exemplary for a temple community project. One cannot help but also mention His Holiness Radhanath Swami, and here I would put the emphasis on his ability to empower others. We see so many of his disciples, followers, are doing so much simply by his inspiring them, because he sees, here's someone with this qualification, let's give him facility for that. In fact, we were speaking about this. I just rode from Govardhan Eco Village here yesterday with Radhanath Swami. And this was one of our subjects of conversation, was that he was saying, as managers, as leaders, we should be, how did he put it? We should identify what a particular devotee's special strength is, and we should engage them with reference to that strength, or in order to bring out that strength. So I see him as exemplary in that. I would say that, again, we should acknowledge explicitly that there is this tension, and we should reflect on how to make it a creative tension rather than a destructive tension. And part of this, I would say, is within the training. So there is something of a tension between the need for what's the term for systematic standardized, yes, for standardized education, training, and so on. And there's, on the other side, the concern that this can be counterproductive or going against the spirit of spontaneity and so on. Here I would say on the side of standards and system, to also make a point of celebrating difference. That means to highlight amongst the students, to see their differences and to appreciate, oh, this is very interesting, this is nice. We can perhaps think about how this kind of approach could be developed, and also this approach. Another general point may be related to this. Sometimes there are differences in questions that may be more on the practical side and some more on the theoretical, philosophical, theological side. And what I see again and again is our culture seems to push us towards saying it's either this or it's that. And there's no discussion about the possibility that it may be actually both and, or something in between. There seems to be a tendency in our culture to be very uncomfortable with ambiguity and with gray areas, with ambiguity and uncertainty. And I think we need to allow for both of these and be comfortable with them, to allow for creative solutions to questions and issues and problems that come up. Yes. And when we speak of standards, this brings the notion of rules, and we need to remember and remind ourselves that of Rupa Goswami's point that there are principles and there are details, but that doesn't solve the issue just to say there are principles and details, because one Vaishnava's principle is another Vaishnava's detail, and vice versa. But at least to understand that idea that there are principles and details helps us also to understand how a standard may be right for certain conditions, certain situations. Values, I would say, patience is a kind of value. Equal vision, a very important value, which is constantly emphasized in our shastras. Again, empowering others. And possibly the most inclusive value, I would say, is the one given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Saragrahi Vaishnavata, the principle of finding the essence in any person, in any situation, in any issue. And thus, I would translate Saragrahi Vaishnava as broad-mindedness. And this ties back in with the principle of flexibility. First skill, I would say, listening. And the broader category, of course, is communication skills. It starts with listening. I'm probably not the first to say this, of those you've been interviewing. Second, I would say team building, for managers especially. And third, perhaps you don't get this one so often, is a very good sense of humor. I think a good sense of humor goes a long way in being supportive and encouraging to others, enlivening everyone, and showing the way to deal with failure, for example, to deal with shortcomings, is humor. very broadly speaking, the outreach thrust of ISKCON, certainly we want to preserve this. This is, in a sense, a trademark of our society, that we have a huge energy of outreach. So we certainly want to preserve that. And if I can go on to the next one in relation to that, I would say the lack of emphasis on what I would call in-reach. Culture of letting us reflect, a culture of encouraging ourselves and others to reflect on what we do and so on. Whether that be in the form of journaling or talking with each other and so on. This, of course, it's part of the culture that Rupa Goswami gives. Guhyamakyati pritchati is actually a reflecting, and also svadhyaya, one can think of it as a kind of self-reflection. So I think there's maybe not a completely perfect balance between the outreach and the inreach, and I think we want to strive for a balance. The emphasis or overemphasis, perhaps, and if I say this, it can be misunderstood, but yeah, the emphasis is good, the overemphasis is bad. The overemphasis on numbers, quantities of whatever, numbers of temples, numbers of devotees in the temples, numbers of books, and so on. And an overemphasis on results. And I hasten to say, of course, we know Srila Prabhupada was very interested to hear results. And so I don't want to say we should drop the emphasis. I want to say we should be careful that it doesn't become overemphasis and therefore something goes out of balance. Because, I mention this because some devotees who are not members of ISKCON, who are perhaps in other Vaishnava, Gaudiya Vaishnava missions, this has been a point of critique. Say, oh, these ISKCON devotees, they're only concerned with numbers, they're only concerned with money, and so on. So I think that's a good message to reflect. One point I would make, and I think you're already working on this, is sharing of best practices. And one form of such sharing, which I think could be developed, comes from a practice among cities of the world, where you have sister cities. And this has given me the idea that we could have sister temples, or brother temples, whatever, where there could be exchanges, and different sorts of exchanges might be done. It could be two temples of sort of equal size and so on, but it might also be a big sister, little sister relationship, where one is helping the other. They help each other, but in different ways, that sort of thing. I think that could be more developed. Perhaps it's being done to some extent already here and there, but I think it could be developed. And another point, and this can easily get controversial, but I think one step we need to make to mature as a society is we need to learn individually and collectively how to positively acknowledge other Vaishnava groups, other Vaishnava institutions and missions. We need to have some more discussion about how to do that in a way which is beneficial to everyone. I like to give the example of countries recognizing officially the existence of other countries through which diplomatic relations can happen. If you don't recognize a country's existence, then there's no relationship, and therefore there's no possibility of improving the relationship. There's only a possibility of maybe fighting and war. And I think we want to go beyond that. And I think ISKCON can be a leader in this regard, because there's a history of Gaudiya institutions avoiding each other, ignoring each other, criticizing each other, and so on. So I think we could be a leader in overcoming that tendency, because the greater outside world that we're preaching to, when they get exposure to our mission, they're not, one of the questions they will have is, so what's the whole picture of this tradition? And now it's very easy for them, through the internet, to see that ISKCON is not the only society of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And so they start to question, so what is the relation between these? And if they come to conclude that there isn't a relation, or it's an unpleasant relation, they will say, well, what is this? Insufficient care for devotees, including congregation, members of congregations. I've seen cases where devotees who are very senior, and over the years, because of becoming grihastha and so on, moving out of the temple, having their own lives, but at the same time wanting to be connected to the temple, but finding themselves more or less alienated from the temple, partially perhaps because of their own shortcomings, but also because of shortcomings of immaturity of devotees in the temple. And then what I've seen is a kind of real division in some cases. There are the devotees, there's the temple, and there's the congregation. Sometimes a part of a congregation wants to completely split away because they've felt mistreated or whatever. And they may also make mistakes. They may be disrespectful to someone, some leaders, and therefore it spirals down into a dysfunctionality, which obviously we want to avoid. So I think we need to think more carefully how to solve that dynamic, how to avoid that dynamic. One thing that comes to my mind is something the GBC has been discussing, but I don't think they've come to any definite conclusions about, is the notion of ISKCON affiliates. Unity and diversity, this phrase that Prabhupada wrote in the famous letter, how to realize it, in a sense, in the long run, it seems like it's going to be, maybe it'll be inevitable, so we don't have to worry, but I think maybe we should worry, we should be working on it more, how to develop systems such as affiliates. And sometimes there's talk about one model being the Roman Catholic Church with their different monastic orders. And I'm personally kind of attracted to that idea. There's the Jesuit order, there's the Dominican order, there's the Franciscan order. And actually they have, those are the three most famous, but they have many different orders. They have, I think, over 200 different orders where they have, each of these orders has specific things that they emphasize. And it's all, spelled out. So they all agree to all the principles of their church, plus they have something that they especially focus on, or something that they especially emphasize, or a particular style of living or preaching and so on. So I think that would be very helpful, because I think it would show that actually Krishna consciousness is so potentially so inclusive, and this can make our society so much more attractive. Again, I would like to see more and bigger country communities. I sort of avoid the word farm community because I think country is more inclusive. It may include village, it may include a variety of things. In particular, again, I would emphasize that there be cows, because I think that could also be a trademark, so to say, of our society. Oh yes, the Hare Krishnas, they keep cows, they protect cows. And that can do so much to get people thinking, why am I eating so many animals? Why am I eating meat? They're showing that this is not only not necessary, but not right. Yeah. And then ashrams for everyone, including women ashrams. If we read the biography of Mother Yamuna, there's a considerable discussion in there about the challenges she had together with Mother Dina Tarini to establish an ashram for women. She had practically no help at all. So I remember Mother Malati had a women's ashram in Columbus, Ohio for some time. I think there could be more of that, more discussion of how such things can be established. And yes, back to this point of acknowledging other Vaishnava groups, I like to envision that we would indeed have networks of connections with other Vaishnava groups. And also with non-Vaishnava religious organizations. And this gets into another topic that I'm kind of engaged with in a minimal way at present, but what I call dialogical Vaishnavism. I'm developing a seminar on this topic of, it's often called interreligious or interfaith dialogue. From a Vaishnava perspective, I'd like to call it dialogical Vaishnavism. So developing more connection with others so that we are not seen as, sort of exclusivist sect and so on. Adjustments, I didn't come up with something specific on this. The phrase that came to my mind was the expression of Srila Prabhupada being independently thoughtful. I think this needs to be cultivated. to allow for fresh ideas of how to move the obstacles out of the way to make these things happen. I've just mentioned one project I'm working on, Dialogical Vaishnavism. I'll be doing a seminar in Mayapur in January with this little project that Bhakti Rasayana Sagar Maharaj has developed, a 5-day seminar on this. And I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of developing something more, perhaps course material, something of this sort. Another thing that I'm working on, I mentioned cows. I'm doing some research. I'm writing a book on the subject. It's going to be an academic book called Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics. But my hope is that this may also draw some attention from our leaders to think more deeply how to implement cow protection in our society. This relates to a broader theme that I feel we need to be engaged with, and that is what I will call environmental Vaishnavism. We just had this conference on Hinduism and ecology, and I think as Vaishnavas we have to have education on this topic and engagement in it. And the third activity that I'm involved with is Srimad Bhagavatam studies in an academic context. Myself, together with His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu, have published 2 books with Columbia University Press. One is a collection of articles introducing the Bhagavatam thematically for an educated, you could say, undergraduate educated audience, readership. And we have published a Bhagavatam reader, which is selections from all 12 cantos of the Bhagavatam, taking our own translations, summarizing all the portions which are not translated, and also giving a chapter with some insights, some sampling, you can say, of the commentarial tradition. So this is an ongoing research project, which is a lifetime project, really. But what we're hoping is to bring to the scholarly world a sense, a recognition that we are at the center of research on this text. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada said, research, there's no need for research. It's all here. Yes, it's all here, and our research is, in a sense, how to help people on educated people to recognize that it's all here. So these 3 projects are what I've been doing, and as far as words of wisdom go, I will just say, let us continue following our previous acharyas with all energy and determination.